My family cut me off for marrying beneath my status, but the day they begged me for money, I realized I finally had the power to decide how their story would end. I grew up in a house where appearances mattered more than reality, and reputation was treated like oxygen, something you didn't notice until it was gone. My name is Brooke Ellison, and for most of my childhood, I believed my parents loved me unconditionally. We lived in Frisco, Texas. My father, Thomas Ellison, liked to joke that the HOA rules were stricter than federal law. He never broke them. Not once. Dad had spent decades climbing the corporate ladder in supply chain management for a national retailer. My mother, Carol, didn't work a traditional job by the time I was in high school. She volunteered on fundraising committees, organized charity auctions, and knew exactly which social circles mattered and which ones didn't. My older sister, Allison, fit into that world perfectly. She was polished, confident, and seemed to glide through life without ever stumbling. She married Gregory Drake, a commercial real estate developer with perfect teeth and a handshake that felt like a business contract. Their wedding looked like something out of a magazine spread: ballroom, crystal centerpieces, string quartet. My parents paid for every detail with visible pride. I was not that daughter. I wasn't rebellious. I didn't sneak out, didn't party, didn't cause trouble. I just didn't care about climbing the same ladder. I studied hard, got a practical degree, and took a stable job at a hospital procurement department. My parents tolerated it, probably assuming I'd eventually marry someone who would elevate me the way Gregory had elevated Allison. Then I met Caleb. I wasn't supposed to meet Caleb Shaw. It happened because my garage door stopped working during one of the hottest weeks of summer. The repair company sent a technician, and instead of the gruff, middle-aged guy I expected, a man about my age stepped out of the truck carrying a toolbox and a bottle of water already half empty. He smiled like he was genuinely happy to see another human being, which immediately made him stand out from most people I knew. "Afternoon," he said. "Garage door hostage situation?" I laughed before I could stop myself. That was new too. I didn't laugh easily around strangers. He fixed the door in less than an hour, explained what had gone wrong without talking down to me, and charged exactly what the estimate said. No surprise fees, no pressure, no subtle sales pitch. As he packed up, he hesitated, then said, "If it acts up again, call me directly. Sometimes these things just need a tweak." He handed me a card with his name, Caleb Shaw, and a personal cell number scribbled on the back. I remember thinking, this man trusts people. That felt rare. We ran into each other again a week later at a grocery store. He recognized me immediately. "Garage door still behaving?" he asked, holding a basket full of frozen meals and sports drinks. We ended up talking in the cereal aisle for almost half an hour. No posturing, no measuring each other's worth. Just conversation. Real conversation, the kind that makes you forget to check your phone. By the time we said goodbye, he asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime. Not in a slick way, not rehearsed, just straightforward, a little nervous. I said yes. Dating Caleb felt like stepping into a different universe. He didn't care about networking events or who knew who. He cared about showing up on time, keeping his word, and making sure I got home safely. He noticed when I was stressed and brought takeout without making a big deal about it. He listened. The first time I went to his place, I understood how different our worlds were. He lived in a modest apartment above a strip of small businesses. The furniture didn't match. The TV sat on a simple stand. There were tools neatly arranged in one corner and a stack of invoices on the kitchen table. But it was clean, comfortable, real. He told me he'd started working right after trade school, saved everything he could, and eventually bought his own service truck. His goal was to grow the business enough to hire a crew and maybe buy a small house. No illusions. No shortcuts. Just work. I fell in love with him quietly, then all at once. The first time I mentioned him at home, my mother asked, "What does he do?" in that tone that already carried judgment. "He owns a garage door company," I said. Silence stretched across the dinner table. My father set down his fork. "Owns or works for?" "Owns. It's small, but he's building it." My sister exchanged a look with her husband that they probably thought was subtle. Mom smiled tightly. "Well, everyone has to start somewhere." Translation, not where we expected. They insisted on meeting him, which I naively thought meant they were trying. Dinner was at their house, formal, of course. My mother cooked 3 courses even though she usually hated cooking. Dad opened a bottle of wine he'd been saving. Allison and Gregory showed up early, dressed like they were attending a business function. Caleb arrived exactly on time wearing a button-down shirt and slacks instead of his usual work clothes. He had clearly made an effort, and that somehow made the tension worse. Mom spent most of dinner asking questions that sounded polite but weren't. "So, what do your parents do? Do you see yourself expanding beyond manual work? Have you considered additional education?" Caleb answered every question calmly, respectfully, without defensiveness. He talked about hiring apprentices someday, maybe opening a second location, building something stable. Dad barely spoke at all. After Caleb left, the verdict came down immediately. My mother said I was limiting my future. My father said marriage wasn't just about love, it was about partnership, networks, long-term positioning. My sister asked if I was going through some kind of phase. I remember sitting there thinking, they didn't hear a word he said. They saw a job title and decided that was the whole man. I thought they'd come around once they saw how serious we were. Once they realized this wasn't rebellion, it was love. I was wrong. When Caleb proposed, simple, heartfelt, just the two of us at a park, I said yes without hesitation. Telling my parents felt like announcing a disaster. Mom cried. Not happy tears. Dad went very still, which was worse than yelling. He said, "You're making a mistake you can't undo." I told him it wasn't a mistake. He said, "Then you'll have to live with the consequences." I didn't realize at the time that the consequence he meant was losing them entirely. A week later, my mother called to say they would not be contributing to the wedding. Not because they couldn't afford it. Because they couldn't support it. She said she couldn't celebrate something she believed would hurt me. Dad told me I was welcome to attend family events alone if I wanted, but Caleb would not be invited until he had proven himself. Allison didn't even pretend to be conflicted. She said she hoped I'd reconsider before it was too late. So Caleb and I planned the wedding ourselves. Small backyard ceremony at a friend's house. Folding chairs. String lights. His family brought food. His mom cried happy tears the entire time. His dad shook my hand like I'd done something honorable. On my side, there were empty chairs. My parents didn't come. My sister didn't come. A few extended relatives sent polite regrets. Only my cousin Sierra showed up, looking nervous like she might be reported for being there. She left early after getting multiple calls from her mother. I remember walking down the aisle trying not to look at the gaps. Trying not to wonder what I had done that was so unforgivable. But when I reached Caleb, none of it mattered. He looked at me like I was the only person in the world. And for the first time, I realized something quietly devastating. I wasn't losing everything. I was choosing something better. I just didn't know yet how much that choice would cost. The silence after the wedding wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, methodical, like someone had simply erased me from a list. At first, I thought they just needed time. My parents had always cooled off after disagreements. A few weeks, maybe a couple months, and things would settle back into polite normal. So I waited for the call. Or the text. Or even a passive-aggressive email. Nothing came. I sent a thank you note anyway, even though they hadn't attended. It felt like something a good daughter would do, like maybe if I acted normal, they would too. No response. My birthday came and went. No call. No card. Not even a one-line message. Thanksgiving passed. Then Christmas. I mailed them a holiday card with a photo from the wedding, one of the few pictures where the empty chairs weren't obvious. I wrote, "Miss you. Hope you're well. Love you always." The envelope never came back, but they never acknowledged it either. After a year, I sent another Christmas card. Shorter message. Less hopeful. After the second year, I stopped. Meanwhile, life didn't collapse the way they predicted. It was hard, sure, harder than anything I'd known growing up, but it was honest. Caleb and I rented a small duplex at first, the kind with thin walls and a driveway barely wide enough for 2 cars. In the summer, the air conditioner struggled so much we slept with a fan blowing directly on us. In the winter, the heater made a noise like a dying animal every time it kicked on. But it was ours. We cooked almost every meal at home because eating out felt like a luxury. Caleb worked long hours, sometimes leaving before sunrise and coming back after dark, clothes smelling like metal dust and engine grease. I worked my hospital procurement job during the day, negotiating contracts for equipment most people never think about until something goes wrong. Some nights we barely spoke because we were too exhausted. Other nights we sat on the couch eating takeout containers straight from the carton, watching cheap reality shows and laughing at things that weren't even that funny. It wasn't glamorous. It was peaceful. About a year into the marriage, Caleb came home one evening looking like he was trying not to explode. "I got approved," he said, dropping a stack of papers on the table. "For what?" "A loan. Small one, but enough to buy another truck and hire someone part-time." I stared at him. "That's huge." He nodded, still looking stunned. "It's risky. Payments are tight. But if it works." If it worked, it meant growth. Stability. A future that wasn't one repair call away from disaster. I thought about my parents' house, their carefully curated life, the way they measured success by appearance. Then I looked at Caleb, hands rough from work, eyes bright with cautious hope. "It'll work," I said. "Because you will." We celebrated with grocery store cupcakes and a 6-pack of cheap beer. It felt more meaningful than any champagne toast I'd seen growing up. 2 years later, we bought a house. Calling it a fixer-upper was generous. The carpet smelled faintly like mildew, the kitchen cabinets looked original to the 1980s, and the backyard was more weeds than grass. But it was in a decent neighborhood in Frisco, close to good schools, and the mortgage was something we could manage if we were careful. Caleb practically rebuilt the place with his own hands. Nights, weekends, every spare moment. I learned how to hold drywall steady, how to sand trim, how to pick paint colors without overthinking them. We didn't hire designers or contractors. We watched tutorials, made mistakes, redid things. Slowly, room by room, the house started to feel like ours instead of someone else's leftovers. When our son Mason was born, we moved his crib into the corner of our bedroom because we hadn't finished the nursery yet. I remember rocking him at 3 in the morning, the house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator, thinking how different this was from the life I grew up in. No nanny. No backup. No family dropping by with casseroles. Just us. But we figured it out. 3 years later, our daughter Lila arrived, loud and determined from the start. By then Caleb's business had grown enough that he had 2 employees and more work than he could handle alone. We weren't rich, not even close, but we weren't constantly terrified anymore either. We hosted birthday parties in the backyard with folding tables and store-bought cakes. The kids ran through sprinklers while adults sat in lawn chairs. It was messy and loud and wonderful. Sometimes, late at night, I wondered if my parents ever thought about us. If they knew they had grandchildren. If they cared. Then I would remember the silence and push the thought away. 10 years passed faster than I expected. By the time Mason was in middle school and Lila was starting elementary, our life had settled into something stable. Caleb's company had a small office space now and a fleet of trucks with his logo on the side. I'd been promoted twice and finally had a salary that didn't require constant budgeting gymnastics. We paid off the last of our credit card debt, built a savings cushion, started college funds for the kids. Nothing flashy, just security. Ironically, we had achieved the thing my parents cared about most, stability, without any of the social trappings they worshipped. Then one Tuesday afternoon, while I was sorting through invoices at work, my phone rang from an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it. Spam calls were constant. Something made me answer. Hello. There was a pause. Then a voice I hadn't heard in a decade said, Brooke. My chest tightened so suddenly I had to grip the edge of my desk. Mom? She sounded older. Thinner, somehow. The crisp confidence I remembered was gone, replaced by something tentative. Oh, sweetheart. I wasn't sure you'd pick up. Sweetheart. She hadn't called me that since before the wedding. I didn't know what to say, so I asked the safest question. Is everything okay? Yes, she said quickly. I've been thinking about you. About the children. We'd love to reconnect. We. Not I. My stomach sank. There was always a we with my parents, like they operated as a single entity. She asked how the kids were, what grades they were in, whether Caleb was doing well. Her tone was warm, almost casual, like we'd spoken last week instead of 10 years ago. I answered cautiously, giving basic information but nothing personal. Then came the shift. Well, she said lightly, your father retired last year, and things have been complicated. There it was. The real reason. She explained that some investments hadn't worked out. The market had been unpredictable. Maintaining their previous lifestyle had become difficult. They'd sold the house, the big one I grew up in, and moved into a condo. Just temporary, of course, she added quickly. Until things stabilize. I stared at the spreadsheet on my screen without seeing it. And? I asked quietly. She hesitated, then said, family should support each other during difficult times. My throat went dry. What are you asking, Mom? We were hoping you and Caleb might be able to help. Just a little. Maybe monthly assistance or help with certain expenses. Medical costs are so unpredictable at our age. And down the line, we might need somewhere to stay temporarily. Temporarily. Like the 10 years of silence had been temporary too. I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding, trying to process the audacity of it. Not a single apology. Not even an acknowledgement of what had happened. Just need. Mom, I said slowly, we haven't spoken in a decade. She sighed, the sound heavy with practiced disappointment. Brooke, that was a long time ago. You can't hold on to the past forever. The past. As if it were a minor disagreement instead of a complete abandonment. I realized then that she wasn't calling to rebuild a relationship. She was calling because they had run out of options. And somehow, in her mind, that made me obligated to fix it. After that call, I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot for almost 40 minutes before driving home. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just felt hollow. Like someone had reached into my chest and stirred up memories I had carefully packed away and sealed shut. When I walked through the front door, Caleb was at the kitchen counter helping Mason with math homework while Lila colored beside them. The normalcy of it hit me so hard, I had to pause for a second. Hey, Caleb said, glancing up. You okay? You look pale. My mom called. The pencil stopped moving in Mason's hand. Lila looked up like she'd just heard a ghost story. Caleb straightened slowly. Your mom? I nodded. The kids knew my parents existed in the abstract, the way you know about distant relatives you never meet. We had never hidden it, but we also never volunteered details. Mason asked carefully, do we have grandparents? Technically, I said. Yes. Caleb told the kids to finish homework in the living room and gently steered me toward the back patio. The sun was setting, turning the sky that soft orange that makes everything look calmer than it is. What did she want? He asked. I told him everything. The retirement. The failed investments. The condo. The request for money. The possibility of moving in temporarily. He didn't interrupt once. Just listened, jaw tightening a little more with each detail. When I finished, he let out a slow breath. And no apology. Nope. No acknowledgement. Nope. He rubbed the back of his neck, staring out at the yard where the kids' soccer goal leaned slightly crooked. I'm trying really hard not to say something disrespectful about your parents. I almost laughed. Go ahead, I said. I've had 10 years to say them in my head. He shook his head. They hurt you. I don't need to pile on. That was Caleb. No drama, no speeches, just quiet loyalty. What do you want to do? He asked. I don't know. And that was the honest truth. Part of me wanted to slam the door forever. Another part, the part conditioned since childhood to be a good daughter, whispered that abandoning them now would make me exactly what they'd accused me of being. Caleb sat beside me on the patio step. Whatever you decide, I've got you. If you want to help them financially, we'll figure it out. If you don't, that's okay too. You wouldn't resent it? I asked quietly. He looked genuinely confused. Why would I resent you for taking care of your parents? Because they treated you like you were invisible. Because they skipped our wedding. Because they erased you from existence. But he didn't say any of that. Over the next few days, the pressure escalated. My father called. He didn't bother with warmth. Brooke, he said, voice clipped and formal, your mother tells me you're hesitating. I clenched my jaw. I'm thinking. There's nothing to think about. We're your parents. There it was, authority instead of affection. He launched into a speech about obligation. How much they'd invested in my upbringing. Private schools, extracurriculars, college tuition. As if parenting were a loan I was now required to repay with interest. You've done well for yourself, he continued. It's time to return the favor. Return the favor. Like raising a child was a business transaction. I said, carefully, you haven't spoken to me in 10 years. He exhaled sharply, irritated. You made choices we couldn't support. I got married. You married beneath your potential. The words landed like a slap, even after all this time. I married someone I love. That's not the point. Of course it wasn't. He went on about reputation, long-term consequences, the importance of aligning with the right people. It sounded like he was reading from a script he'd rehearsed years ago and never put away. When he finished, I said, I'll think about it, and hung up before he could respond. 2 days later, Allison texted me. Not called. Texted. Hey, Mom says you're being difficult. They really need help. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. I'm not being difficult. I'm processing. Her response came instantly. Look, Greg, and I can't help. Things are tight for us too. You're the one with the stable life. I almost laughed out loud. Allison and Gregory lived in a gated community with a 3-car garage. Their vacations showed up on social media like clockwork. If they were tight, it was because of choices, not necessity. She sent another message. Mom and Dad were embarrassed back then. You have to understand their position. Embarrassed. Of me. Of Caleb. Of the life we built with our own hands. Something inside me went cold. I typed back, embarrassed enough to pretend I didn't exist for 10 years? She didn't reply for hours. When she finally did, it was just, you're being dramatic. That word, dramatic, had been used my entire life anytime I expressed hurt or anger. It was a convenient way to dismiss feelings without addressing them. Over the next week, the messages multiplied. My mom left voicemails, her voice thick with tears, saying she just wanted her family back. My dad sent short, formal emails outlining their financial situation like a proposal. Allison alternated between guilt and irritation. Then came the line that stuck in my chest like a splinter. You'll regret this when they're gone. It was meant to scare me into compliance, but instead it made something else click. They weren't reaching out because they missed me. They were reaching out because they needed me. And they were willing to use whatever emotional leverage worked. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, I found Caleb in the garage reorganizing tools that were already perfectly organized. That was his stress tell. I think they expect us to take them in, I said. He set down a wrench slowly. Do you want to? I don't know if I can. He nodded, like he'd already come to that conclusion himself. We could help financially without letting them move in, he said. Set boundaries. Keep it controlled. Even that idea made my chest tighten. Money meant connection. Ongoing contact. An open door. They never wanted anything to do with us until now, I said. Not even the kids. They have 2 grandchildren they've never met. Caleb's eyes softened. That's their loss. I keep thinking, if I say yes, it erases everything they did. Like it didn't matter. And if you say no, he asked gently, then I'm the daughter who abandoned her aging parents. He didn't rush to reassure me. He just sat beside me on the concrete floor, shoulder warm against mine. You're not abandoning them, he said finally. You're responding to how they treated you. The next morning, I drafted a polite email declining financial support. I explained that we had obligations to our children, that our resources weren't unlimited, that we hoped they would find a solution that worked for them. I stared at the send button for a long time. Then I hit it. The fallout was immediate. My mom called 3 times in a row. I didn't answer. My dad sent a single-line reply, disappointing. Allison texted, I can't believe you'd do this to them. For the first time in days, I felt something other than anxiety. Relief. Not triumphant, not proud, just lighter, like I had finally put down something heavy I'd been carrying since childhood. but I underestimated how far they were willing to go. Because a few days later, my cousin Sierra called me out of the blue, her voice tight with worry. "Brooke," she said, "I think you need to know what they're telling people about you." And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just a private family conflict anymore. They were rewriting the story. And this time, I wasn't sure staying silent would protect anyone. When Sierra said that, my stomach dropped in a way that felt almost physical, like missing a step in the dark. "What do you mean?" I asked. She hesitated, the way people do when they're about to tell you something that will change how you see everything. "I went to lunch with my mom and a couple of your aunts yesterday," she said. "Your parents came up. And, Brooke, the story they're telling isn't what actually happened." Of course it wasn't. I walked out to the backyard and sat on the edge of the patio, staring at the half-dead patch of grass Caleb kept meaning to reseed. "What are they saying?" My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Sierra exhaled slowly. "They're telling people you cut them off. That Caleb didn't like them and pushed you away. That you've refused to let them see the kids. And that now they're struggling financially because you won't help." For a moment, I couldn't process the words. They didn't just twist the truth, they inverted it completely. "They're saying I abandoned them?" I asked. "Yes." Her voice softened. "Most people don't know what really happened, Brooke. You disappeared from family events, they sold the house, nobody heard from you. It's easy to believe. Easy to believe because it sounded cleaner than the truth." Anger finally flickered to life in my chest, slow and controlled. Not explosive. Cold. "Are people buying it?" I asked. "Some are. Some aren't. But a few relatives have been quietly helping them out. Money, groceries, stuff like that. They think they're helping neglected elderly parents." The irony was almost laughable. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because it felt wrong," she said simply. "And because if it were me, I'd want to know." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time listening to the distant sound of traffic and the neighbor's dog barking at nothing. 10 years of silence, and now they were using that silence as proof that I had abandoned them. When Caleb got home, he found me still outside, staring at nothing. "What happened?" he asked immediately. I told him. His expression didn't turn angry the way I expected. It went very still, which was somehow worse. "So they're trying to control the narrative," he said quietly. "They're turning me into the villain." He sat beside me, elbows on his knees. "Do you want to fight it?" "I don't know how. Truth is a pretty good start." That night, after the kids were asleep, I opened an old email account I hadn't touched in years. It was where most of my communication with my parents had happened before everything stopped. The inbox was like a time capsule. There were the messages I'd sent after the engagement, trying to reassure them. Emails about wedding details they never responded to. Holiday greetings. Updates about jobs, about the house, even about Mason's birth, a carefully written announcement with a photo attached. None of them had replies. Scrolling through it felt like reading letters from someone who didn't realize she was writing into a void. Then I found their messages. Short, formal ones from my father saying they needed space. One from my mother saying she couldn't attend the wedding because it was too painful. Another saying they hoped I would come to my senses. And then, nothing. No effort to reconnect. No check-ins. No curiosity about whether I was okay. I saved everything. Next, I dug out a plastic storage bin from the closet, the one that held old paperwork, photos, things I couldn't quite throw away. At the bottom was our wedding album. Tucked inside the cover was the guest list my mom had helped draft before she withdrew her support. I stared at the empty columns next to my parents' names, next to Allison's, next to dozens of relatives who had followed their lead. Caleb came in quietly and sat beside me on the floor. "You don't have to do this tonight," he said. "I do," I replied. "Because if I don't, they control the story forever." Over the next few days, I gathered everything. Emails, voicemails, screenshots of texts from Allison, even the envelope from the Christmas card I'd sent that had never been opened, returned to sender after they moved without telling me. It wasn't dramatic evidence. No smoking gun. Just a long, quiet record of absence. I didn't post it publicly. I didn't blast it on social media. That would have felt too much like revenge. Instead, I wrote a calm, factual email and sent it to the relatives who had reached out expressing concern about my parents. No accusations, no emotional language, just the timeline, with documentation attached. I ended it with a single sentence. "I love them, but I will not rewrite history." Then I closed the laptop and waited. The response wasn't immediate, but it was unmistakable. A few relatives replied with apologies for misunderstanding. One aunt admitted she had wondered why I would suddenly cut contact without explanation. Another said she wished she'd known sooner. Some didn't respond at all. And then Allison called. Not texted. Called. Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "What did you do?" I told the truth. "You humiliated them." I clarified. She let out a harsh laugh. "Do you have any idea how bad this makes them look?" I thought about the empty chairs at my wedding. The unanswered messages. The years of silence. "Yes," I said quietly. "I do." She sputtered something about family loyalty, about private matters, about airing dirty laundry. I let her talk until she ran out of steam. Then I said, if they didn't want people to know, they shouldn't have lied. She hung up on me. For the first time since all this started, I slept through the night. But the calm didn't last. 3 days later, a car I recognized pulled into our driveway. I hadn't seen it in over a decade, but some things stick in your memory, like the silver sedan my parents used to drive everywhere. My hands started shaking before I even stood up. Brooke. Caleb called from the kitchen. Someone's here. I didn't answer. I already knew who it was. Through the window, I watched my mother step out of the car slowly, like the ground might shift under her. She looked smaller, older, the careful polish replaced by something fragile. For a split second, instinct kicked in, the old reflex to run outside, to greet her, to fix whatever was wrong. Then I remembered the email. The lies. The 10 years of silence. Caleb moved to stand beside me, his presence steady and solid. You don't have to open the door, he said quietly. My mother walked up to the porch and knocked. Not hard. Not demanding. Just a soft, hesitant knock, like a stranger asking for directions. The sound echoed through the house, through years of memory, through a part of me I wasn't sure I trusted anymore. And I realized this was the moment where everything would either fall back into old patterns, or finally change for good. The knock wasn't loud, but it felt like it reverberated through my bones. For a second, nobody moved. Caleb stood beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his arm but not touching me, giving me space to decide. The kids were upstairs, thankfully oblivious, arguing over something trivial the way kids do when the world still feels safe. My mother knocked again, a little firmer this time. Brooke, she called softly through the door. I know you're home. Of course she did. My car was in the driveway. Caleb's truck was parked behind it. There was no pretending we weren't there. I forced myself to walk forward, each step feeling heavier than the last. When I opened the door, I didn't step aside. I just stood there, blocking the entrance. Up close, she looked older than I'd imagined. Not just gray hair or wrinkles, something diminished. Like the version of her I grew up with had been slowly deflated. Hi, Mom. Her eyes filled immediately, scanning my face like she was trying to memorize it. Oh, sweetheart. She reached forward like she was going to hug me, then stopped when I didn't move. Can I come in? She asked. No. The word came out calm, almost gentle. That surprised me more than anything. She blinked, clearly not expecting resistance. I drove all this way. I just want to talk. We can talk here. For a moment she looked past me, probably hoping to catch a glimpse of the house, to assess it, measure it, catalog it the way she always had. Caleb shifted slightly behind me, not threatening, just present. A quiet reminder that I wasn't alone anymore. I didn't like that email you sent, she said finally, voice trembling. I didn't like being lied about. Her mouth tightened. We were hurt. You ignored me for 10 years. We needed time. You needed a decade? Tears spilled down her cheeks. Real ones, not the carefully controlled crying I remembered from childhood. We thought you'd come back. That sentence landed harder than anything else she'd said. Come back. As if my marriage was a detour. As if my life was something temporary I would eventually abandon. I didn't leave, I said quietly. You did. She shook her head, wiping at her face. Your father was embarrassed. We both were. We didn't know how to explain it to people. Explain what? That your daughter married a kind man who works with his hands? Out loud, I said, you didn't have to explain anything. You just had to show up. She didn't answer that. Instead, she looked over my shoulder again. Are the children here? I'd love to meet them. The casual assumption that she had the right to them made something in my chest go cold. No, I said. You can't. Her eyes widened. Brooke, they're my grandchildren. They're also the grandchildren you chose not to know for over 10 years. That wasn't our intention. It was your action. Silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. I could hear a lawnmower somewhere down the street, the distant hum of normal life continuing while mine felt suspended. Finally she said, very quietly, we're in trouble. There it was. The real reason she was standing on my porch. The condo fees went up, she continued. Your father's pension isn't enough. Medical bills are starting. We don't know what we're going to do. I waited. She swallowed. We were hoping, maybe we could stay here. Just for a little while. We could help around the house. Cook. Watch the kids. As if we had been holding our lives together with duct tape, waiting for them to arrive and rescue us. Caleb stepped forward then, not aggressively, just enough that she had to acknowledge him. Mrs. Ellison, he said politely, we're not able to offer that. She looked at him like she'd just noticed he existed. For a flicker of a second, I saw the old disdain flash across her face, the reflex she probably couldn't control. This is a family matter, she said stiffly. I am her family, he replied calmly. The contrast between them was almost painful. She turned back to me, desperation creeping into her voice. Brooke, please. We have nowhere else to go. And there it was, the moment I had dreaded, imagined, rehearsed in my head without realizing it. I thought about the empty seats at our wedding. The unopened cards. The birthdays, holidays, births, milestones they had chosen to miss. The years Caleb and I spent building a life without them, piece by piece, never expecting help. I also thought about my kids upstairs. Safe. Happy. Unburdened by the kind of conditional love I grew up with. If I let my parents in now, what would they bring with them besides their suitcases? Judgment. Resentment. The same quiet poison that had shaped my childhood. I'm not going to let you move in, I said. She stared at me like she didn't understand the words. But I continued, I'm not leaving you completely stranded either. Hope flickered across her face so fast it was almost painful to watch. We'll pay for 3 months of a modest rental, I said. Directly to the landlord. No cash. No strings. That gives you time to figure out a long-term plan. Her expression shifted from relief to something more complicated. Pride wrestling with need. 3 months, she repeated. Yes. And after that? That's up to you. She hesitated, clearly calculating whether she could push for more. This isn't what I imagined, she admitted. I almost smiled. It's not what I imagined either. She nodded slowly, defeated in a way I'd never seen before. For the first time in my life, she looked like someone who had run out of leverage. Thank you, she said finally, voice small. Not warm. Not loving. But sincere. She turned to leave, then paused at the edge of the porch. Brooke, she said without looking back. We did love you. In our way. I didn't answer. Because the truth was, love that disappears when it's inconvenient doesn't feel like love to the person left behind. She walked to the car, got in, and drove away without another word. I stood there until the sound of the engine faded completely. Caleb placed a hand on my shoulder, grounding me. You okay? He asked softly. I considered the question carefully. For years, I had imagined revenge as something loud, dramatic confrontations, harsh words, doors slammed shut. But this didn't feel like revenge. It felt like balance. I think so, I said. Upstairs, Lila called down asking if we could order pizza. Mason wanted extra cheese. Life, ordinary and steady, waiting for us to rejoin it. I closed the door and locked it, not out of fear but out of finality. Later that night, after the kids were asleep and the house was quiet, Caleb asked the question I'd been avoiding. Do you think you'll ever let them back in? I stared at the ceiling, thinking about the woman on my porch, about the parents I remembered, about the years in between. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe someday. Maybe not. Because forgiveness isn't the same thing as access. And for the first time in my life, I understood that I was allowed to decide the difference. So now I keep wondering, did I do the right thing by helping them without letting them back into my life? Or did I just choose a softer way to say no?